Hello. So, on the latest episode of Seeblue Smarts, I'm joined today by Jake, and we're going to talk a little bit about FY23 planning as we're in the midst of it for a lot of our clients, and specifically, actually, how to architect an ABM program which is going to be sustainable throughout the course of the year. So, we know that we're seeing a lot of clients shift their focus towards shorter term revenue opportunities, which is completely understandable given the economic environment. But actually what we're going to talk about today is actually how you can do the combination of both short and long term growth. And actually it's really important that we do keep focused on the longer term sustainable growth, whilst accepting that we do absolutely need to capitalize on those shorter in quarter activities. So I know, Jake, you've written a lot about this topic, and actually, I think probably a good one for you to kick us off on. Where are you actually seeing most ABM programs fail?
I mean, to be honest, there's several areas. So the first and foremost, I would think, and is just relating to what you were just talking about in terms of planning for FY23, is around setting the right KPIs. So you can set those upfront KPIs. What are the short-term goals that you need to be aiming for, as well as the long-term, as well as the long-term growth? So if you can align on what are the KPIs that we're going to be driving with this campaign, then that means that you're putting yourself in the right frame of mind to work towards actually achieving those KPIs. Also, at the same time, what really leads to the failure of ABM programs is, one, people not totally being bought in from across the business into the program. So when it comes to ABM programs, everyone is as important as the next person. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So you need to get everyone totally aligned on what is it that we're trying to achieve and how are we going to achieve it? What's the strategy? What are the tactics that sit underneath that to how we're going to build that out? And what does that look like, as you said, from short right to the long term? The final one, and this one is really, really important for me, is around capacity and resource. So when you're running ABM, it is going to take a lot more effort than just your sort of broad marketing campaigns, because you're going right down into that detail. You're taking it, you're elevating it from that product led approach, and you're separating out all your messaging, all your value propositions, all of that outbound execution into multiple groups and segments. So whether that's industries, verticals, or individual accounts, or maybe clusters of accounts, it will take more effort. And if you try and do too much too quickly with ABM, then you're just going to lose that momentum with people, and people are just going to go back to what they knew.
Absolutely. And I think your point around alignment, not just of sales and marketing, but actually that wider ABM group, because it is quite extensive when it's done properly, is a really interesting one. And it's not just the initial buy-in, right? But it's actually making sure that early on those expectations are set, that over the course of a year or however long that program is going to be running for. But as we know, ABM performs best when it's 12 months plus. Ensuring that we've got their buy-in throughout the course of the year. And actually, it's a really difficult thing because there are competing priorities as the year goes on. Different things take center stage. So actually really considering that upfront, how you're going to manage that, how you're going to manage the time expectations of those individuals, and be really cognizant of what else they've got going on, is really, really important. Really important. And I think your capacity box, right, is a really interesting one. I remember reading your article, or rereading, I should say, your article recently. I think it's a really useful construct to actually frame this thinking. So I don't know if you want to share a few thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I mean, you're taking a little piece of everyone when it comes to ABM, because we've got to, at the end of the day, everyone's got their responsibilities. You're not just turning the business on its head and saying, right, we're all ABM now. So you're taking a little bit from everyone. You've got time from the marketing executive, from the BDRs, from all the sales teams, from the product teams, even from the ops teams and from the executives as well. Because everyone needs to be aware of this. So what we were just talking about in terms of that visibility is, even when the execs aren't really touching any of this, they're bought into the program. They understand the short term, they understand the long term. So there's a little bit of their time they're giving. The ops team, they're really important as well. They're not doing the execution, but they're setting up and facilitating for execution for the sales team to be as effective and efficient as possible. So you're taking a little piece of everyone, some more than others, and you've got to have a bit of a vision in mind. There's not an exact science to it. It's probably a bit of a finger in the air exercise as to what is achievable with the time that you're going to have across those team members. So that's where the idea of the box comes in, is that everyone is contributing to the size of the box, and then you can fill that with what's going to be most effective, what's going to and this is important, what's going to build that scalable model, so that as the program grows, as the box grows, then you can start filling more things in as well. And as people get more used to the theory of ABM, how to work together, how to get the best from everyone, and also as you start having those ABM messages that you can just learn from. So if you've got a cluster for CIOs, for example, that's working really effectively, and and you think there's going to be a lot that you could learn that you could start pushing to CISOs, then you can start actually really seeing those efficiencies and the scale of ABM. And I mean, maybe this is probably a bit. It's probably, you're gonna have to visualize this and bear with me here. But if you take the box analogy, and you've got the amount of effort that goes into each of the campaigns, as people get more used to it, therefore, so the effort, as in the size of the box that is going into it, should also reduce as well, because of those efficiencies, because of the knowledge, and because of the experience that people are bringing to the ABM program.
It makes absolute sense, and it's one of those things that is so important to think about upfront, but particularly at the moment where actually there may well be pressures on the size of the team and where their focuses are, right? And I think that point around the box again is quite an interesting one, because actually when you think about ultimately the capacity that you've got to deliver, that is another really important factor, because it then leads to the $1 million question, right? Which is, if you're just starting ABM, where do you start? And if you're already doing a little bit of ABM, or even if you're established, how do you evolve it, right? Where'd you go? Where'd you move? And that for me is quite an interesting one, because certainly I see a few clients, I would say, that actually are probably overextending what they're hoping to achieve with an ABM, and actually, almost boiling the ocean, right? To coin the jargon, but it is true. You've got to be really mindful about, not just what you can deliver over the course of a year, but what you can deliver effectively, and more specifically, commercially effectively. Right? How can you deliver that ROI, that tangible value at the end of the day? So, I mean, I've got a few thoughts on this as well, but tell me where you're seeing some of your clients, I suppose, start their ABM journey. Where's the best jumping off point, or certainly your recommended jumping off point?
I mean, I can give where my recommended and preferred jumping off point is, and it largely does depend on the client at the end of the day. You want to start with, where's the perceived opportunity? Where do you think that the value is that you can drive with this program? And also, what does the total addressable market look like for your business? And actually, what is the size of the opportunity within each of the individual accounts, or within each of the perceived segments within those accounts? So to answer the question, if you're the sort of business where you have a few massive value clients, and that you can cross-sell, upsell, and build these massive platforms within these accounts, and have these lighthouse accounts that are doing most of your that is most of your revenue, then I would definitely say to start with one-to-one, because it's about understanding how we can scale those the business within those accounts, and treat them on a one-to-one basis, because maybe your platform just does substantiate just having that total unique and bespoke platform development or setup for the individual accounts. And this is where my preferred one is starting with the clusters. So obviously, when you're starting to try and break down what is the message for 20, 30 accounts, and how can we effectively be running ABM into those accounts on a one-to-one, or rather one-to-few level, that's where you're going to see some real economies of scale, but also being able to effectively execute an ABM program that you can scale in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think certainly when I'm advising clients, I'm a very data-oriented person, very data-led, and for me, it's always, what is the potential ROI of this activity? So, within any given accounts, right? If you follow your Pareto principle, you're going to have 20% of your accounts providing 80% of the revenue. That's usually a pretty good place to start. I mean, we know customers are a lot easier to sell into, to upsell, right, than it is to acquire. It's much more difficult to acquire a new customer. But actually, looking at that ROI is a really good point, because it does dictate the level of investment and the level of effort and activity that is warranted, especially if you've got an upcoming RFP within one of your key accounts, your must-win accounts, whether it's acquisition, retention, cross-sell, upsell, whatever that situation is. That is definitely, or it certainly ought to be, a focus. Right? But I think probably what the key is here is wherever you are in that ABM pyramid, right? Whether you're at the sharp end and you're doing some really hyper-personalized one-to-one activity, whether it's one-to-few clusters, more of the programmatic ABM at the base of the pyramid. The reality is that you can move any which way, right? Depending on, as you say, it's always circumstantial to any given set of business considerations, any given client. But there's always the ability to move up or down the pyramid, and typically do it in quite an effective manner, certainly quite an efficient manner, if you've got that proper structure in place up front. Right? You know what's supporting the ABM program, both in terms of people, but also in terms of resources, assets, content, all of those things. If you've got that in place, it's actually quite a straightforward. We call it straightforward, but certainly you remove a lot of barriers to moving up and down. And yeah, I think that probably leads quite nicely onto a point that something I've seen with a few clients recently, again, about efficiency. How do we drive efficiency? Because again, budgets are being squeezed. So how do we do more with less? How do we leverage what we've already got? Again, wherever you are in the pyramid, if it's, you've done a bit of industry ABM and you've got a load of great assets into the finance sector, but you want to tailor that to a specific opportunity within Lloyds Bank, within HSBC, whatever it may be. Well, actually, there is the opportunity to do that. But in terms of efficiency, and certainly where I like to start, and again, it's quite a data-led thing, and particularly quite a sales-led thing as well, is saying, well, what do I have available? Because you will have a lot of assets, but what are the really key things, the really relevant things for ABM? And actually, weirdly, where I've seen a lot of success, and don't ask me why, but it's on salespeople's desktops. You don't want to look too closely on those things. However, usually there's gems, right? So whether they could have responded to an RFP, or they may have customized a solution to a specific client who had a specific challenge. But actually, there are gems in those places, and it's very easy to take those, repurpose, recycle them, and put them as top of funnel content that can absolutely support ABM activity. So whether it's an RFP response that you suddenly turn into an industry-wide piece of content, or whether you've got an industry-wide piece of content that you want to focus to a specific account because someone from sales has got some really great knowledge locked away somewhere, maybe in your CRM, wherever that may be. These are the things that we need to look out for, right, in terms of efficiencies, to say, we've actually got this. We don't need to do too much with it, but let's take it and let's activate it and get in market.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to build on that point there, I mean, you're spot on. That's why it's so important to get everyone involved into this, is that there's gems all over the place that aren't just going to be on your intranet. Because for example, I was on in a workshop a few months ago, and we were talking about personas, and one of the BDRs said, I had a conversation with this guy at this company who said this to me, and everyone was like, what? And I can't remember exactly what it is, but that then became pretty much the predominant message for what we were going into, because that small insight there gave us that clarity on what the persona's challenges were and what they were experiencing, and what solution they needed to resolve that problem and what they cared about. And so having that visibility and just the input from everyone is just so important, because you don't know what you don't know, and someone can just bring something so small to the table that can just unlock pretty much exactly what you're needing to get in front of your audience.
Couldn't agree more. And I think with that point, we've come quite nicely full circle back to that capacity box piece. So probably a great point to wrap up. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, Jake. Hopefully anyone listening found it interesting. Till next time.
Thanks, Luke.